I honestly thought changing my locks would be enough. That fantasy died this afternoon when a detective called to ask if I was safe. He reported 3 people trying to break into my old apartment, with one even scaling the balcony while screaming my name. When he asked if I wanted to press charges for criminal trespassing, I hesitated. Why? Because those intruders were my parents and my sister. Tell me, have you ever been loved so much it felt exactly like stalking? My name is Rosemary Perez, and for the first time in 29 years, I was actually enjoying the sound of silence. It was 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, in my previous life, the one I had abandoned exactly 3 weeks ago. This was the witching hour. This was the time my phone would usually start blowing up with texts from my mother demanding to know why I had not liked her latest Facebook post, or calls from my father asking me to troubleshoot a printer I was 20 miles away from. But today, inside Unit 402 of the Harbor View Residences, the air was still. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic bubbling of my electric kettle heating water for a cup of Earl Grey. I had curated this moment with the precision of a bomb disposal technician. My phone was face down on the coffee table. Switched to silent mode. Not vibrate. Silent. I had learned the hard way that even the buzzing of a phone against a hard surface could trigger a Pavlovian spike of cortisol in my bloodstream. I had a lo-fi playlist humming so quietly it was barely there, just enough to fill the corners of the room with something other than the echoes of my own anxiety. I poured the water, watching the steam curl up against the late afternoon sun streaming through the window. This apartment was my sanctuary. It was my secret, and for 3 weeks, it had been the only place on earth where I felt like a human being rather than a public utility owned and operated by the Perez family. Then, the screen of my phone lit up. It did not ring, and it did not buzz. But the light caught my eye. I froze, the ceramic mug warming my palms. My first instinct was to ignore it. That was the rule I had set for myself with my therapist. Elise, if it is not in your contacts, let it go to voicemail. If it is in your contacts and their name starts with Mom or Dad, definitely let it go to voicemail. But the screen kept lighting up. Once, twice, then it went dark, only to light up again immediately, a relentless, frantic strobing that demanded attention. I walked over to the table, my heart doing that familiar, painful flutter against my ribs. I flipped the phone over. It was not my mother. It was a local number I did not recognize, a Minneapolis area code. Against every survival instinct I had honed over the last decade, I slid my thumb across the screen and lifted the device to my ear. "This is Rosemary," I said, my voice sounding tighter than I wanted it to be. "Ms. Perez?" The voice on the other end was male, deep, and clipped with professional urgency. "This is Detective Morales with the Minneapolis Police Department. I need to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Are you safe right now?" The question hit me like a physical blow. The steam from my tea suddenly seemed to turn into ice. "Am I safe?" I repeated, the words feeling clumsy in my mouth. "Yes, ma'am. Are you in immediate danger? Is there anyone in your residence who shouldn't be there?" "No," I said, but as I spoke, my eyes darted toward the front door. I checked the deadbolt visually. Locked. I checked the chain. Engaged. It was a reflex, a muscle memory of fear that bypassed my logic entirely. I am home. I am alone. Everything is fine. Why? What is going on? I heard Detective Morales exhale, a sound of static through the line. "Okay, that is good. We are calling because we have a situation unfolding at your registered address on Powderhorn Terrace. We received multiple 911 calls from neighbors regarding a disturbance." My stomach dropped through the floor. Powderhorn Terrace, my old apartment, the one I had vacated under the cover of darkness, the one where the lease had officially ended, but where the ghost of my presence apparently still lingered. "What kind of disturbance?" I asked, sinking onto the edge of my brand-new slate-gray sofa. "We have 3 individuals currently attempting to gain forced entry into the unit," Morales said. He spoke with the flat, factual tone of a man who had seen everything, yet he sounded slightly baffled by this particular brand of chaos. "They are banging on the front door and screaming your name. the current residents, a Mr. and Mrs. Doyle, are barricaded inside and are quite distressed. I closed my eyes. 3 people? Yes, a middle-aged female with dyed red hair, a male in his late 50s, and a younger female, early 20s, wearing a neon green hoodie. The younger female was actually apprehended while attempting to scale the balcony to the 2nd floor. The image seared itself into my brain instantly. I could see it as clearly as if I were standing in the parking lot. The red hair was Donna, my mother. She would be the one banging on the door, likely shouting that she had a right to check on her daughter, probably weeping loudly enough for the neighbors 3 doors down to hear. The heavy-set man was Frank, my father. He would be standing just behind her, looking aggrieved, fueling her hysteria while pretending to be the calm patriarch. And the neon hoodie? That was Brielle, my younger sister, the golden child. The only person I knew entitled enough to think that climbing a balcony in broad daylight was a reasonable solution to a locked door. "They are screaming my name?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Loudly," Morales confirmed. "They are claiming to be your family. They are insisting that you are inside and potentially hurt, or that you are being held against your will. They told the officers on the scene that they have a right to enter the premises because they possess a key, although the key they have does not work on the new locks the Doyles installed." I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, a hysterical, jagged thing that I had to swallow back down. Of course they had a key. They always had a key. That was the problem. That was the whole reason I was sitting here in a building they did not know existed, clutching a phone like a lifeline. "Ms. Perez," Morales said, his voice cutting through my internal panic. "The tenants, the Doyles, are terrified. They have never met these people. From their perspective, 3 strangers are trying to break down their door. Now, these individuals are claiming they are your parents and sister. Can you verify this description?" "Yes," I said. "That is them. That is my mother, my father, and my sister." "Okay," Morales paused. "Here's the situation. They are currently detained in the hallway. They are not under arrest yet, but they are being very uncooperative. They are insisting we break the door down to save you, since you are safe at a different location, and since you no longer reside at that address. Their actions constitute a serious breach of the peace and attempted breaking and entering." He took a breath. "Ms. Perez, do you want to request that we press charges for criminal trespassing?" The world seemed to stop spinning for a second. "Press charges." The phrase hung in the air, heavy and metallic. In the lexicon of the Perez family, you did not press charges. You did not even raise your voice. You swallowed the disrespect. You apologized for being in the way of their intrusion. You handed over the spare key because it was easier than fighting the 2-hour guilt trip about how much they sacrificed for you. But I was not in the old apartment anymore. I was in Harbor View. I was the woman who had moved out in the middle of the night without leaving a forwarding address. "They don't know I moved," I said, more to myself than to the detective. "They think I'm inside ignoring them." "That explains the volume," Morales said dryly, "but it does not excuse the climbing of the balcony. The neighbor who called 911 said the young woman nearly fell. This is not normal behavior. Ms. Perez, if you want us to disperse them with a warning, we can, but given the aggression the officers are reporting, the homeowners, the Doyles, are pushing for an arrest. They want to know if you support that." I looked down at my hand. I was holding the key card to my new building. It was a sleek, white rectangle of plastic. It represented the only boundary I had ever successfully enforced. For 29 years, I had been told that family was everything, that family meant zero privacy, that family meant my mother reading my diary at 14 and mocking my crushes at the dinner table. That family meant my father tracking my phone GPS to see if I was lying about being at the library. That family meant my sister using my apartment as a crash pad for her and her friends whenever she felt like it. "Ms. Perez?" Morales prompted. "I'm here," I said. I imagined the Doyles. I didn't know them, but I knew they had rented my old place hoping for a home. Now they were huddled inside, watching a woman with red hair scream at their door while a 20-year-old in neon climbed their railing. They were victims of the Perez family circus, just like I had been. I started, then stopped. I looked at the imaginary audience in the room with me. I looked at you. Yes, you. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking, Rosemary, that is your mother. That is your dad. Sure, they are overbearing. But calling the cops? Letting them face charges? Isn't that a bit extreme? You have probably heard the phrase helicopter parents and thought it sounded annoying but ultimately harmless. You probably think that parental love, even when it is suffocating, is still love. But let me ask you something. Have you ever been loved so much that you had to flee your own life like a fugitive in a witness protection program? Have you ever been cared for to the point where 3 adults are trying to physically break into a stranger's house because they cannot conceive of a world where you are allowed to have a closed door? If I told you the whole story from the beginning, you would not be sitting there judging me. You would not say, "Oh, it is just family drama." You would hand me the handcuffs yourself. "Ms. Perez, I need an answer," Morales said, his tone shifting from patient to pressing. "The officers on scene need to know how to proceed." I took a deep breath. It felt different than the shallow breaths I used to take in the old apartment. It felt like the air before a thunderstorm. "I will come down there," I said. "To the scene?" Morales asked. "No, I am not going anywhere near that apartment. I am not letting them see where I came from or where I might be going. Take them to the station. If they want to verify that I'm alive and safe, I will come to the precinct. I will walk through the front door of the police station, and I will identify them. And regarding the charges? If they are still screaming when I get there," I said, my voice hardening into something cold and sharp, something I didn't recognize. "Then yes, we can talk about charges." "Understood," Morales said. "We will transport them now. I suggest you take your time. Ms. Perez, it sounds like they are going to be processing this reality check for a while." I hung up the phone. My tea was cold. The playlist had looped back to the beginning. The silence of the apartment was no longer peaceful. It was heavy with anticipation. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the Mississippi River. The water was gray and churning, moving relentlessly forward, never looking back. I was going to the police station. I was going to look my parents in the eye while they sat in a holding room. For the first time in my life, the power dynamic was not going to be dictated by guilt or obligation. It was going to be dictated by the revised statutes of the state of Minnesota. I grabbed my purse and my keys. As I walked to the door, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked pale. I looked terrified. But for the first time, I didn't look like a daughter. I looked like a plaintiff. To understand why I was willing to let a detective handcuff my parents, you have to understand the geography of my childhood. We lived in a 2-story colonial in Maple Grove, a house with beige siding, a manicured lawn, and a front door that was painted a welcoming shade of navy blue. To the outside world, it was the picture of suburban stability. But inside, specifically on the 2nd floor at the end of the hall, my bedroom was less of a sanctuary and more of an observation deck where I was the only specimen. I was 14 years old when I realized that the concept of a closed door was, in my mother's eyes, a personal insult. Technically, I had a door. It was white wood, standard issue. It had a brass handle and a small locking mechanism that you could pop open with a fingernail or a bobby pin. But in the Perez household, engaging that lock was treated as an act of war. The rule was never written down, but it was etched into the drywall. Nobody knocks for Rosemary. My mother, Donna, did not believe in the transition between spaces. She believed in immediate presence. I would be changing my clothes, shirtless and vulnerable, and the door would swing open without a warning tap or a cleared throat. I would scramble to cover myself with a pillow or a shirt, my face burning with the unique humiliation of puberty, and she would just stand there, holding a basket of laundry or a vacuum cleaner. "Oh, stop it," she would say, rolling her eyes as if my modesty were a dramatic performance. "I changed your diapers. Rosemary, There is nothing I haven't seen. This is my house. I pay the mortgage on these 4 walls. If I want to walk into a room in my own house, that is my right. It was not just about nudity, it was about thought. If I was sitting at my desk doing algebra, the door would open. If I was crying because of a mean comment at school, the door would open. If I was just staring at the ceiling, trying to decompress, the door would open. She needed to know what I was doing, what I was thinking, and why I wasn't doing something else. Her favorite pastime was the backpack excavation. I would come home from school, leave my bag by the door, and go to the bathroom. By the time I came out, the contents of my bag would be spread across the kitchen island like evidence in a federal investigation. Textbooks, gum wrappers, crumpled notes passed in class, tampons, everything was fair game. "I am just making sure you aren't hanging out with the wrong crowd," she would say, flipping through my private journal with the casual air of someone reading a magazine in a dentist's waiting room. I remember standing there, watching her read a page where I had written about feeling lonely, waiting for her to offer comfort. Instead, she looked up, her expression tight with judgment. "You have terrible handwriting, Rosemary, and why are you so dramatic? You have a roof over your head. You don't know what real loneliness is." She wasn't looking for drugs or contraband. She was looking for parts of me that she didn't own yet. She was mining my personality for raw materials she could criticize. While Donna controlled the physical space, my father, Frank, controlled the data points. That was the year smartphones started becoming ubiquitous for teenagers, and he handed me my first iPhone with a gravity that suggested he was handing me a loaded weapon. "This is for safety," he told me. "I need to know you are safe." He installed a location tracking application immediately. He explained that it was a precaution, just in case I was kidnapped or, in his favorite hypothetical scenario, if I slipped on the ice while walking home and fell into a ravine. It sounded loving. It sounded protective. The reality was a digital leash. If I told him I was going to the library, and the GPS dot on his screen showed me across the street at the coffee shop, my phone would ring within 30 seconds. "You are off course," he would say. No hello, no preamble. "I just crossed the street to get a latte. Dad," I would whisper, hiding in the corner of the shop so my friends wouldn't hear. "You said library. The coffee shop is not the library. Accuracy matters. Rosemary, lying about your location starts with coffee and ends with you dead in a ditch." He tracked my speed when I eventually started driving. He tracked my battery percentage. He tracked how long I stayed in one location. I felt like a tagged animal in a wildlife preserve, allowed to roam only as long as I stayed within the fences he had built. The cruelty of this surveillance was magnified by the fact that it was not universal. Down the hall, my younger sister, Brielle, lived in a different country entirely. Brielle was 2 years younger, artistic, loud, and chaotic. She was the free spirit. Her bedroom door was covered in stickers and posters. When Mom approached Brielle's room, she knocked, a soft, polite rap on the wood. "Brielle, honey, can I come in?" If Brielle shouted, "Go away," my mother would actually chuckle. "She is in her creative process," Mom would whisper to me, as if Brielle were Picasso rather than a messy 12-year-old making slime on her carpet. Brielle didn't have the tracking app. "Her battery is always dead anyway," Dad reasoned, shrugging. Besides, Brielle doesn't have Rosemary's tendency to be sneaky. I wasn't sneaky. I was just desperate for 5 minutes where nobody was watching me. The breaking point, or what should have been the breaking point if I had possessed a spine back then, happened on my 14th birthday. I had been allowed to invite 3 friends over for a sleepover. It was a rare concession. We were in the basement, sitting on sleeping bags, eating popcorn, and talking about boys. Specifically, we were talking about Justin, a boy in my earth science class who had recently texted me to say he liked my sweater. In the currency of 8th grade, this was a marriage proposal. I was showing the text to my friends, giggling, feeling that warm, bubbly sensation of being normal, of being liked. Then, the basement door opened. Mom came down the stairs carrying a tray of cupcakes. We all sat up, putting on our polite company faces. She set the tray down and smiled, her eyes scanning the room. She spotted my phone sitting on the sleeping bag. The screen still lit up with Justin's message thread. "Oh, who is popular tonight?" she asked, swooping down to snatch the phone before I could react. "Mom, please," I said, my stomach dropping. "It's nothing." "Don't be rude. Rosemary, I pay the bill for this data plan." She unlocked the phone. She knew my passcode. Obviously, it was a condition of owning the device. She held it up, adjusting her glasses, and began to read aloud. "Hey, Rose," she read, using a mocking, deepened voice to imitate a boy. "I saw you in the hall today. You looked really pretty. Maybe we can sit together at the assembly tomorrow." My friends went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a sweet, innocent message. It was private. Mom laughed, a sharp barking sound. "Oh, listen to this, Romeo. You looked really pretty." He probably says that to every girl with a pulse. "Rosemary, do you really think a boy like that is looking at you? He just wants someone to do his homework." She looked at my friends, inviting them in on the joke. "She actually thinks it's real. Isn't that cute?" She didn't stop there. She scrolled up. She read my replies. She critiqued my flirting. She dissected my vulnerability in front of the only social circle I had. She turned my first fragile attempt at romance into a comedy sketch for her own amusement. My friends laughed nervously because they were terrified of her. I just sat there, staring at a stain on the carpet, wishing the floor would open up and swallow me whole. The next day, Justin stopped texting me. A week later, he sat with someone else. When I finally cornered him to ask why, he looked uncomfortable. "My mom knows your mom," he mumbled. "She said your mom read our texts to her at the grocery store. It's weird. Rosemary, I don't want your mom reading my stuff." He was right. It was weird. It was pathological. I learned a lesson that night, one that stuck with me longer than any algebra formula. I learned that in the Perez house, anything you loved would be used against you. If you showed excitement, it was mocked. If you showed secrecy, it was investigated. The double standard followed us into high school. When I got a B- on a chemistry test, I was grounded for 2 weeks. "We expect excellence from you," Dad said. "You are the responsible one." When Brielle skipped school to go to a music festival 3 hours away, Mom framed the ticket stub. "She is finding herself," Mom told the neighbors. "She has such a zest for life. Rosemary is too rigid, but Brielle, she flies." So, I stopped being rigid. I stopped being anything. I became a gray rock. I stopped writing in my journal because I knew it would be read. I stopped bringing friends over because I knew they would be analyzed. I stopped dating because I knew my partners would be scared off. I learned to curate a version of myself that was boring enough to be ignored. I kept my door open because closing it only invited a louder invasion. I let them track the GPS. I let them read the texts I carefully sanitized before coming home. I survived by becoming a ghost in my own life. But even ghosts have a breaking point. I would lie in bed at night, staring at the open door, listening to the sounds of the house, Dad snoring, Mom's TV shows, Brielle talking on the phone late into the night, and I would fantasize, not about a prince, or $1 million, or fame. I fantasized about a lock, a heavy steel deadbolt that slid into place with a definitive thunk, a lock that had only one key, and that key was in my pocket. I told myself that once I moved out, the door would finally close. I told myself that privacy was just a geography problem, and once I changed zip codes, the surveillance state would fall. That was the lie that kept me alive, and as I sat in that police station 15 years later, remembering the boy who was scared of my mother, I realized just how naive I had been. Geography doesn't fix a lack of boundaries. Only consequences do. The turning point came in the form of an offer letter from Northbridge Creative. It was a mid-level graphic design position with a salary that, to my sheltered eyes, looked like a king's ransom. For the first time, the math worked. I could afford rent. I could afford groceries. I could afford the luxury of existing without a chaperone. I spent weeks scouting locations with the secrecy of a Cold War spy. I needed a place that hit the specific geographical sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone of parental distance. If I moved to the other side of the country, my mother would claim I had abandoned the family and likely feign a heart attack to guilt me back. If I moved 5 minutes away, they would treat my home as an annex of their own. So, I chose Powderhorn. It was a 25-minute drive from their house in Maple Grove. 25 minutes was perfect. It was just long enough to be inconvenient for a casual drop-in, but short enough that I could still drive home for Sunday dinner to keep the peace. It was a buffer zone measured in highway miles. The apartment was on the second floor of a brown brick building that smelled faintly of old carpet and floor wax. It was not glamorous. The countertops were a laminate yellow that had not been stylish since the 70s, and the water pressure in the shower was more of a suggestion than a force. But when I sat down to sign the lease, my hands were shaking. I looked at the signature line. Tenant, Rosemary Perez. There was no secondary line for guarantor. There was no space for Frank Perez to sign his approval. There was just me, my credit score, and my pen. When the leasing agent, a bored woman named Sheila, handed me the copy, I wanted to frame it. That piece of paper was not just a rental agreement, it was a declaration of independence. Furnishing the place became my first act of rebellion. Growing up, our house was a showroom of beige sofas, glass tables that we were terrified to touch, and art that matched the curtains. My mother had a strict aesthetic that could best be described as, "Don't breathe on it." In my apartment, I went in the opposite direction. I bought a velvet armchair from a thrift store that was a shocking shade of teal. It had a scratch on one leg and it smelled like someone else's attic, and I loved it. I found a dining table on the curb that wobbled if you leaned on it too hard. I bought a rug that was entirely too bright. Every item I dragged up those stairs was a statement. This is mine. I chose this. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be here. I honestly believed that the physical act of moving out would rewrite the social contract with my parents. I believed in the great American unwritten rule of adulthood. You know the one. It is the rule that says when a child leaves the nest and pays their own bills, the parents step back. They become guests. They knock. They call before coming over. I had seen it in movies. I had heard my coworkers talk about it. I assumed this was a universal law of physics, like gravity. I was so incredibly naive. The first crack in my armor appeared 3 days before the move. I was packing boxes in the garage when Donna appeared, holding a small, shiny brass key. It was a copy of my new apartment key. I had left the original on the kitchen counter for 5 minutes while I grabbed a glass of water, and that was all the time she needed. "I made a copy," she said, holding it out to me with a benevolent smile. "Just for emergencies." I froze. "Mom, I don't think you need a key. The landlord has a master key. If there is an emergency, they can let you in." Her smile faltered, replaced instantly by the wounded look she had perfected over 3 decades. "The landlord? You would trust a stranger over your own mother? Rosemary, be realistic. What if there is a fire and you are asleep? What if you choke on a piece of steak and can't reach the phone? What if you slip in the shower?" She listed these catastrophes with such speed and detail that it was clear she had been rehearsing them. I want to be independent, Mom," I said, my voice weak. "Independence doesn't mean stupidity," she snapped, then softened her tone to that cloying sweetness. "It is just a piece of metal. Honey, it stays on my keychain. I will probably never use it. It is for my peace of mind. Do you want me to lie awake every night worrying about you bleeding out on your kitchen floor?" That was the trap, the Perez trap. If I said no, I was actively causing her suffering. If I said no, I was cruel. So, I took the path of least resistance. I let her keep the key. I told myself it didn't matter. I reasoned that 25 minutes of traffic was a formidable barrier. I told myself that she was just having empty nest syndrome, and that once I was gone, she would get busy with her own life and forget she even had the key. I was banking on her rationality. That was a bad bet. But on that first night, I didn't know that yet. That first night was pure magic. I remember locking the door. I turned the deadbolt, and the sound it made, a solid, heavy thunk, was the most beautiful piece of music I had ever heard. I put the chain on. I checked it twice. The apartment was filled with boxes. The air was stale, but it was empty of other people. I walked into the center of the living room and just stood there. I spun around slowly. No eyes were watching me. No camera was recording me. No voice was about to critique my posture or ask why I wasn't doing something more productive. I went to the kitchen and made a sandwich. When I was done, I put the plate in the sink, and then, this is the part that sounds insane to anyone with a normal upbringing, I left it there. I didn't wash it. I didn't rinse it. I just left a dirty plate with crumbs and a smear of mustard sitting in the sink. I stared at it, waiting for the lightning bolt, waiting for the lecture about how laziness is a sin and how ants would carry us away by morning. But nothing happened. The plate just sat there, inanimate and silent. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive. It was the silence of a library, not a prison. I pulled out my phone and FaceTimed Naomi, my best friend since college, and the only person who knew the full extent of my family's madness. "Show me," she screamed the second the video connected. I walked her through the apartment, holding the phone up to show off the teal chair, the wobbly table, the view of the alleyway which, to me, looked like a Parisian vista. "It is a dump," I laughed, spinning the camera around. "But it is my dump." "It is a palace," Naomi corrected me. "How does it feel?" "It feels like I can breathe," I said. I didn't realize how shallow my breathing was until right now. "Naomi, I can walk around in my underwear. I can eat ice cream for dinner. I can invite you over and we can talk about whatever we want without whispering." "Did they give you trouble about the move today?" she asked. "Mom cried a bit about me abandoning her to die alone," I said, rolling my eyes. "And she bullied me into giving her a spare key for emergencies. But I don't care. I am here. They are there. The cord is cut." "Just make sure she knows that missing you isn't an emergency," Naomi warned. "She knows," I said confidently. "Even Donna has limits. She wouldn't drive 25 minutes just to annoy me. That is a round trip of almost an hour. She hates driving in the city." I truly believe that. I sat on my second-hand sofa that night, drinking a glass of cheap wine, watching the streetlights flicker through the blinds. I felt like I had graduated. I had crossed the finish line of a marathon I had been running since I was 14. I looked at the door one last time before bed. It was locked. It was impenetrable. The world was outside, and I was safe inside. I went to sleep that night with a smile on my face, the deep, dreamless sleep of the liberated. It is funny. Looking back now, I was so arrogant. I thought I had won a war when I had really just moved the battlefield to a new location. I thought I was protected by social norms, by the universal understanding that an adult woman's home is her castle. I didn't realize that to my parents. I wasn't a queen in a castle. I was a squatter in a property they believed they still owned. And as for the unwritten laws of privacy, well, unwritten laws are just paper tigers to people like Donna. She didn't care about social contracts. She had a key, and in her mind, a key wasn't just a tool to open a door. It was a permit that never expired. My peace lasted exactly 6 days, and when it ended, it didn't end with a bang. It ended with the smell of bacon. The invasion began with a smell. It was 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, in my new life as an independent woman. Sundays were supposed to be sacred. They were reserved for sleeping until my body decided to wake up, followed by a quiet bowl of yogurt, granola, and a book on the balcony. My apartment was supposed to smell like my lavender fabric softener and the stale, comfortable air of a space that had been closed up for 8 hours. Instead, I woke up to the aggressive, salty scent of frying bacon. For a few seconds, lying there in the groggy haze of sleep, I panicked. I thought perhaps I had left the stove on, or that the building's ventilation system was malfunctioning and pumping the neighbor's breakfast directly into my bedroom. But beneath the bacon, there was another smell. It was a heavy, hazelnut-flavored coffee, the specific brand my mother bought in bulk. My heart hammered against my ribs. A sudden, violent rhythm that had nothing to do with caffeine and everything to do with adrenaline. I threw off the duvet and grabbed my robe, cinching it tight around my waist as if it were armor. I walked down the short hallway to the living room, my bare feet silent on the cheap laminate flooring. The scene that greeted me was so domestic, so utterly normal, that it made my skin crawl. My mother, Donna, was standing at my stove. She was wearing an apron she must have brought from home, a floral thing I had seen 1,000 times, and she was flipping bacon strips with my spatula. My father, Frank, was sprawled out on my second-hand sofa, his feet resting on the coffee table I had bought just 3 days ago. He had the remote in his hand, and the volume on the television turned up loud enough to drown out the hum of the refrigerator. The morning news anchor was talking about a traffic accident on Interstate 94. It felt like a hallucination. It felt like I had walked through a portal and landed back in Maple Grove. Except the furniture was wrong. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Donna chirped. She didn't turn around. She just knew I was there. "I thought you were going to sleep the whole day away." I stood frozen in the doorway of the kitchen. "Mom? Dad? How did you get in here?" Donna turned then, flashing a bright, unbothered smile. She gestured with the spatula, a drop of hot grease landing on my clean counter. "I knocked, honey. I knocked 3 times. You didn't answer. I got worried. I thought, what if she slipped in the shower? What if there is a gas leak and she is unconscious? So, I used the emergency key." "I was sleeping," I said, my voice sounding thin and childish in my own ears. "It is Sunday morning. I was just sleeping." "Well, that is what I figured once we got inside and heard you snoring," Frank chimed in from the couch. He didn't look away from the TV. "But you can never be too careful. Better safe than sorry." "You came into my bedroom?" I asked, a wave of nausea rolling over me. "Just to peek," Donna said, turning back to the bacon. "I didn't want to wake you. You look like you needed the rest. You have circles under your eyes. Rosemary, are you eating enough? You look pale." I looked at the counter, next to the stove. There was a black trash bag. It was full. I saw the corner of a frozen spinach pizza box poking out. I saw my bag of frozen berries. I saw the carton of almond milk I had just bought. "Mom," I said, stepping forward, "what is in the trash?" "Oh, that garbage," she said dismissively. "I was looking for something to cook, and I found your freezer was full of processed junk, preservatives, chemicals. I threw it all out. I brought a cooler with some real food. Steaks, eggs, whole milk. If you're going to live on your own, you need to nourish yourself, not eat like a college student." I stared at the trash bag. That was $70 worth of groceries. $70 that I had budgeted carefully from my first paycheck. "You threw away my food?" I asked. My hands were trembling. I balled them into fists at my sides to hide it. "I am taking care of you." She corrected me, her tone sharpening just a fraction. "Don't be ungrateful, Rosemary. Most mothers wouldn't drive 25 minutes on a Sunday morning to cook their daughter a hot breakfast. Now, sit down. The eggs are almost done." I looked at Frank. He finally muted the TV and swiveled his head to look at me. "Place isn't bad," he said, assessing the room with a critical eye. "But the neighborhood? I don't know. Rose, I saw some characters hanging around the corner store when we drove in. Hoodies up, looking shifty." "It is a normal neighborhood, Dad," I said. "People wear hoodies. It is Minnesota." "It looks dangerous," he insisted. "You are a single girl living alone on the 2nd floor. Easy access from the street. We decided we are going to need to come by more often, just to check the perimeter, make sure nobody is casing the joint." "I don't need checks," I said. "I have a deadbolt." "Deadbolts can be picked," Frank said, as if he were a career burglar rather than an accountant. "We will pop in, random times, keep the bad guys guessing." Donna wiped her hands on a dish towel, my dish towel, and walked over to the small dining table. She reached into her purse and pulled out a key ring. It jingled brightly. "Speaking of safety," she said, dropping the keys onto the table with a clatter. "Since the key you gave me was the only spare, I was worried. What if Dad needs to get in and I am not with him? What if we lose one? So, I went to the hardware store yesterday and had a few duplicates made. One for Dad's keychain, one for the glove compartment of my car, and one for Brielle, just in case she ever needs a place to crash. I looked at the pile of silver metal on my table. It wasn't just a spare key anymore. It was a distribution network. My apartment was no longer my home. It was a public park where any member of the Perez family could roam freely. "You copied the key?" I asked. "Without asking me?" "I am saving you the hassle," Donna said, her eyes widening in that innocent, wounded way she mastered years ago. "Why are you looking at me like that? It cost me $12. I paid for it." "It is not about the money," I said. I felt tears pricking the back of my eyes. Tears of frustration, of impotence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the keys and throw them off the balcony. I wanted to tell them to get out and never come back. But 20 years of conditioning is a powerful thing. The script was already written in my head. Don't make a scene. Don't be the difficult daughter. Don't ruin the nice breakfast. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "I appreciate the breakfast, really. But next time, can you please call before you come over? Just a text? I might have been, I don't know, not decent or busy." The air in the room changed instantly. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Donna's face crumpled. Her lower lip began to tremble. She put a hand to her chest, right over her heart. "I drive all this way," she whispered, her voice thick with sudden emotion. "I wake up early to cook for you. I worry about your safety. And your first reaction is to set rules? To treat me like a stranger who needs an appointment?" "It is not an appointment," I pleaded, hating myself for apologizing. "It is just a heads up." "I am your mother," she cried out, grabbing a napkin to dab at dry eyes. "I changed your diapers. I nursed you. Since when does a mother need permission to see her child? Frank, do you hear this? She is pushing us away. She moves out and suddenly we are unwanted guests." Frank sighed, giving me a look of profound disappointment. "Don't upset your mother, Rosemary. Her blood pressure is already high. Just say thank you for the keys and eat your eggs." I stood there for a long moment. I looked at the bacon grease splattering on my stove. I looked at the trash bag full of my food. I looked at the keys on the table. "Thank you," I whispered. I sat down and ate the eggs. They tasted like ash. They stayed for 4 hours. They critiqued my furniture arrangement. Frank retuned my television picture settings because he said I had the contrast wrong. Donna reorganized my linen closet because my folding technique was sloppy. When they finally left, leaving me with a hug that felt more like a chokehold and a promise to see you soon, I locked the door behind them. I slid the chain into place. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and breathed. I spent the next hour scrubbing the kitchen. I needed to get the smell of them out of my space. I scrubbed the stove until the enamel shone. I took the trash bag of food down to the dumpster, feeling a pang of wastefulness with every step. I came back up and started watering my plants. I had a large fern in the corner of the living room, a housewarming gift to myself. As I poured water into the soil, something caught my eye. There was something nestled in the dirt, hidden behind the thickest fronds near the base of the pot. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a small black cube, no bigger than a die. It had a tiny lens on one side, a battery-operated mini-camera, a nanny cam. I turned it over in my hand. It wasn't turned on. The little indicator light was dark. It looked brand new, like it had just been taken out of the packaging. I flashed back to Donna reorganizing the room while I was doing dishes. She must have slipped it in there to test the angle. Maybe she intended to turn it on next time. Maybe she forgot to switch it on today. Or maybe she just wanted to see if it would fit. I stood in the middle of my living room, holding the little black cube. The silence of the apartment returned, but it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt heavy. It felt watched. I told myself she probably forgot it. I told myself she bought it for home security and just set it down. I made up a dozen excuses because the alternative, that my mother was planning to spy on me in my own home, was too terrifying to fully accept. But deep down, as I stared at that unblinking glass eye, I knew the keys were just the beginning. This wasn't about safety. This was about ownership. And as far as Donna and Frank were concerned, the lease might have my name on it, but the property, meaning me, still belonged to them. The project in St. Paul was supposed to be my victory lap. It was a 48-hour on-site consultation for Northbridge Creative, and for the first time in my professional life, I was the lead. I spent 2 days wearing a tailored blazer, drinking sparkling water in glass-walled conference rooms, and feeling like the adult woman I had pretended to be for years. I stayed in a hotel room that smelled like crisp linen and silence. I slept in the middle of the king-sized bed. I did not check my personal email. I drove back to Minneapolis on a Tuesday evening, humming along to the radio, feeling a sense of calm that I should have known was a trap. I fantasized about walking into my apartment, kicking off my heels, and sinking into my teal velvet chair with a glass of wine, my sanctuary, my quiet, empty, locked sanctuary. The illusion shattered the moment I put my key in the lock. Actually, it shattered a second before that. As I stood in the hallway, I could hear a faint thumping bass coming from behind my door. It wasn't loud enough to shake the walls, but it was there. A rhythmic, irritating pulse. I frowned, checking the number on the door. Unit 204. Yes, this was my apartment. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The smell hit me first. My apartment usually smelled of lavender and old paper. Now, it smelled like a locker room that had been doused in Victoria's Secret body spray. It was a cloying, chemical vanilla scent mixed with the distinct, greasy odor of fast food, specifically, the onion ring zest from the burger joint down the street. "Hello?" I called out, my hand gripping the handle of my suitcase so hard my knuckles turned white. There was no answer, just the hum of the refrigerator and the lingering scent of intrusion. I stepped inside. The living room looked like it had been tossed by a very lazy tornado. There were 3 empty pizza boxes stacked on my coffee table, the grease soaking through the cardboard onto the wood I had polished before I left. There were red plastic cups scattered on the floor, some upright, some tipped over, creating sticky little puddles on my rug. My throw pillows, which I always arranged symmetrically, were on the floor, mashed into makeshift seating. I walked into the kitchen. The sink was full, not just full. It was a sculptural masterpiece of dirty dishes, plates crusted with dried ketchup, bowls with cereal cementing to the sides, and wine glasses, my good wine glasses, smeared with lipstick. On top of the overflowing trash can sat a crumpled receipt. I picked it up with 2 fingers, like it was radioactive. It was from a liquor store 3 blocks away. The timestamp was Saturday night, 9:30 p.m. The name on the card used for payment was Brielle Perez, my sister. I felt a vein in my forehead start to throb. I dropped the suitcase and marched to the bedroom. If the living room was a mess, the bedroom was a crime scene. My bed, which I had made with military precision before leaving, was a tangled nest of sheets and blankets. My duvet was on the floor. There were clothes scattered everywhere. Not my clothes. A pair of neon leggings hung from my lamp. A crop top was draped over my monitor. And there, on my nightstand, was a half-eaten burrito wrapper. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it once before I managed to dial my mother. Donna answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful and bright, utterly disconnected from the carnage I was standing in. "Hi, sweetie. You are back early. How was the big meeting?" "Mom," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Why is my apartment trashed? Why was Brielle here?" There was a pause on the other end, but not a guilty pause. It was the pause of someone trying to remember a minor detail, like whether they bought milk. "Oh, right," Donna said. "Brielle had a little crisis on Saturday. She and Tyler broke up again. You know how emotional she gets. She needed a safe space to decompress, since you were out of town, which you didn't even tell me about until the last minute. By the way, I told her she could crash at your place." "You told her?" I repeated. "You gave her the key?" "Well, obviously," Donna said, sounding impatient. She couldn't sleep in her car, Rosemary, and we were having the carpets cleaned at our house, so the fumes were terrible. It just made sense. Your apartment was empty. It seemed silly to let it sit there collecting dust when your sister was heartbroken. It is my home, Mom, not a hotel. You can't just check people in when I'm gone. She is not people. She is your sister. And honestly, Rosemary, you have a spare bedroom if you count that pull-out sofa. You have plenty of room. Don't be stingy. She trashed the place, I shouted, finally losing my cool. There is pizza on the floor. There is booze everywhere. It smells like a frat house. She was just healing, Donna said soothingly. She invited a couple of girlfriends over to support her. They had a little girls' night. You should be happy she has such a good support system. She was really down. Rose. She was crying her eyes out. I hung up. I couldn't listen to it anymore. If I listened to one more sentence about Brielle's emotional fragility, I was going to throw the phone through the window. I needed to see the extent of the damage. I walked over to my desk. My laptop was closed. Thank God. But my sticky notes, my private reminders, my to-do lists, the little affirmations my therapist told me to write, were rearranged. Then my phone buzzed. It was a notification from TikTok. I didn't follow Brielle on TikTok because her content consisted mostly of lip-syncing to rap songs she didn't understand and complaining about her haters, but the algorithm knew we were related. The video had been posted 24 hours ago. The caption read, "Healing era starts now. THX to Big Sis for the venue. Break up, glow up girls' night." I clicked play. The video opened with a shot of Brielle, holding a red Solo cup, standing in the middle of my living room. She was wearing my silk robe, the one I bought with my first bonus check, the one I only wore when I wanted to feel luxurious. "Okay, guys," she said to the camera, doing a little spin. "So we are at my sister's apartment in the city. It is super cute, right? A little boring, but we are spicing it up." The camera panned around. There were 4 other girls, none of whom I knew, sitting on my furniture, putting their feet on my teal velvet chair. Then the camera cut to the bedroom. Brielle was now jumping on my bed, jumping, with shoes on. "Look at this closet," she shrieked. Pulling open the doors, I kept shut. She started pulling out my blazers. "Rosemary dresses like a librarian. I swear. Look at this." She held up my gray blazer, the one I had worn to my interview at Northbridge. "Who wears this? It is giving corporate slave." She tossed it on the floor. Then, the worst part. She picked up a sticky note from my mirror. It was a note I had written to myself after a particularly hard therapy session. It said, "You are allowed to take up space." Brielle held it up to the lens, zooming in. "Aw, look at this," she laughed. "My sister is so deep. Take up space. Like, okay, girl. Take up space in the gym, maybe?" Her friends laughed in the background. I felt the blood drain from my face, my insecurities, my private therapy work, my clothes, my sanctuary, all of it broadcast to her 3,000 followers for a laugh. She had turned my life into a prop for her breakup content. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, feeling dirty. I felt violated in a way that had nothing to do with physical touch. My phone pinged again, an email. Subject: urgent. Noise complaint. Lease violation warning. It was from the property manager. "Dear Ms. Perez, we received multiple complaints regarding Unit 204 on Saturday night and Sunday morning. Neighbors reported excessive noise, shouting, and music after quiet hours. Additionally, we have reports of individuals vomiting in the hallway near the elevator. Please be advised that this is a violation of your lease agreement regarding conduct and guest policies. A second violation will result in eviction proceedings." I stared at the screen. Eviction. I had been living here less than a month, and my family had already put me on the path to homelessness. I stood up. The rage that filled me was cold and sharp. I didn't cry. I was done crying. I dialed Donna again. "I want the keys back," I said the moment she answered. "All of them. The one you have, the one Dad has, and the one you gave Brielle. I want them on my desk by tomorrow morning." "Excuse me?" Donna's voice went sharp. "Don't you take that tone with me, young lady." Brielle live-streamed from my bedroom. "Mom, she made fun of my therapy notes on the internet. And I just got an eviction warning from my landlord because her friends were throwing up in the hallway. I want my keys back." "Oh, you are exaggerating," Donna scoffed. "Brielle said they were quiet, and nobody threw up. Maybe a little spill. You always make such a big deal out of nothing. You are trying to make your sister look bad because you are jealous she has friends and you don't." "I am not jealous. I am on the verge of being kicked out. Bring me the keys, or I am changing the locks again." Then came the performance. I could hear the intake of breath, the wobble in the voice. "I cannot believe this," Donna sobbed. "I really can't. I carry you for 9 months. I feed you. I worry about you every single day. And this is how you repay me? By shutting me out? By treating me like a criminal who can't be trusted with a key? You are breaking my heart. Rosemary, you are literally breaking my heart. My chest hurts. I can feel it tightening." "Mom, stop," I said, though my stomach clenched with the old guilt. "I have to go," she wept. "I have to go lie down before I have a stroke. I hope you are happy." The line went dead. 2 minutes later, a text from Frank appeared. "Rosemary, your mother is in tears. Her blood pressure is through the roof. She is hyperventilating. We had to get her pills. I don't know what you said to her, but you need to fix it. Stop causing drama. The keys stay with us for safety. We are your parents. We are the only people who actually care if you live or die. Apologize to her. Now." I stared at the phone. He didn't ask about the apartment. He didn't ask about the eviction notice. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just wanted me to get back in line. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I spent the next 3 hours cleaning. I stripped the bed and threw the sheets in the trash. I couldn't wash them. I just couldn't sleep on them again. I scrubbed the floor with bleach. I wiped down every surface Brielle might have touched. Finally, exhausted, I sat down to check my email for work. My laptop wouldn't connect to the internet. I checked the Wi-Fi settings. It asked for a password. That was strange. My computer usually connected automatically. I tried entering my password. Incorrect. I tried again. Incorrect. I looked at the router in the corner of the living room. It had been moved slightly. There was a sticky note on the bottom of it, written in purple glitter pen. "Changed it, BC. Yours was too hard to type, LOL." I tried the new password she had scrawled there. Bad bitches only 2024. The internet connected. I stared at the screen, the little Wi-Fi icon turning solid black. She had changed my password, in my house, on my router. It wasn't just about the mess anymore. It wasn't about the noise. It was the absolute, total colonization of my existence. They didn't see me as a person with a separate life. They saw me as an extension of themselves, a resource to be used, a space to be occupied. My apartment wasn't mine. To them, it was just the family's downtown branch, and I was the ungrateful janitor. I didn't change the password back. I didn't change the locks yet. I didn't have the money to pay the locksmith again so soon. Instead, I unplugged the router. I sat in the dark, in the silence, and I realized something terrifying. Asking them to stop wasn't going to work. Begging them to respect me wasn't going to work. Changing the locks was a temporary fix until they guilted me into a new key. If I wanted to be free, I couldn't just close the door. I had to vanish. I drove to Maple Grove with the radio off. I needed the silence to rehearse my lines. For 25 minutes, I practiced the cadence of a woman who was not afraid of her own parents. I told myself I was not a daughter returning to the nest. I was a diplomat entering hostile territory to sever a treaty. When I pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in, the scene was aggressively wholesome. The lawn was cut in perfect diagonal stripes. The hydrangea bushes were blooming in uniform spheres of blue and purple. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and, as I stepped onto the porch, the unmistakable scent of cinnamon and baked apples. It was the perfect disguise. Who would believe that the people living inside this Norman Rockwell painting were capable of psychological warfare? I didn't use my key to enter. I rang the doorbell. It was a small act of rebellion, a way of establishing that I was a guest, not an inmate. Donna answered the door, wiping flour from her hands onto an apron that read, "World's Best Mom." When she saw me, her face lit up, completely erasing the hysterics of our last phone call. "Rosemary!" she exclaimed, ushering me in before I could speak. "Impeccable timing. I just pulled an apple crumble out of the oven. Frank, Rose is here." She tried to hug me, but I stiffened, keeping my arms at my sides. She pulled back, looking confused, but I walked past her into the living room. My father was in his recliner, reading the Sunday paper. He looked up over his reading glasses, his expression wary. "I am not here for crumble," I said. My voice was steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I am here to get my keys back." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Donna stopped mid-step, the smile freezing on her face. Frank slowly folded his newspaper and set it on the side table. "Hello to you too," Frank said, his voice heavy with sarcasm. "Is this how you greet your parents now? Demands before a hello?" "I asked nicely on the phone," I said, standing in the center of the rug, refusing to sit down. Sitting felt like submitting. "I asked nicely when you first copied them without my permission. I am done asking nicely. I want every copy of my apartment key, the one on Mom's ring, the one in your pocket, and the one you gave to Brielle. I want them on this coffee table. Now." Donna let out a short, nervous laugh. "Oh, Rosemary, don't be silly. We settled this. They are for emergencies." "Brielle throwing a party and live streaming from my bed is not an emergency," I snapped. "You throwing away my groceries is not an emergency. You have abused the privilege. The privilege is revoked." "It is not a privilege," Frank said. He stood up, and at 6 feet tall, he used to terrify me. Today, he just looked like an aging man trying to hold on to power he no longer earned. "We are your parents. We co-signed for your car. We paid for your college tuition. We have a right to access your life." "You didn't co-sign my lease," I countered. "My name is the only one on that document. Legally, that apartment is mine, and legally, if you enter without my permission, it is trespassing." The word hung in the air. Trespassing. Donna gasped, clutching her hands to her chest. "Trespassing? Did you hear that, Frank? She called us trespassers. In her home, the home we helped her move into." "I moved myself in," I corrected her. "And yes, if you come in when I am not there, it is breaking and entering. If I don't get the keys back right now, I am leaving here. I am calling a locksmith, and I am changing the cylinders. And if you try to get in after that, I will call the police." I hadn't planned to say the part about the police. It just spilled out, a byproduct of the adrenaline surging through my veins. Donna's face turned a mottled shade of red. The sweet mom mask dissolved, replaced by the face I knew from my childhood, the face of a woman who was being told no. "After all we did for you," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. "I gave up my career to raise you. I drove you to piano lessons. I sat up with you when you had the chickenpox. I have loved you every single day of your ungrateful life, and you threaten me with police? Over a key?" "It is not about the key, Mom. It is about boundaries." "Boundaries are for strangers," she screamed. "Family doesn't have boundaries. Family is one flesh. You are a part of me, Rosemary. You don't get to lock me out of myself." "I am not you," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through her shouting. "I am a separate person. I am 29 years old, and I am done being your hobby." Frank stepped forward, his face dark. "That is enough. You are upsetting your mother. You are acting like a petulant child. We are keeping the keys because you clearly aren't mature enough to handle the responsibility of living alone if you are this paranoid. We are doing this for your own good." "Fine," I said. I looked at both of them. The woman who saw me as a limb she could control, and the man who saw me as an asset he needed to manage. "Keep the brass. It is worthless scrap metal anyway." I turned to leave. Oh God," Donna suddenly cried out. I stopped and turned back. Donna was slumped against the doorframe leading to the kitchen. She was clutching her left arm, her face twisted in agony. "My chest," she gasped. "Frank, my chest hurts. I can't breathe." It was a performance I had seen a dozen times. She pulled this maneuver when I wanted to go to summer camp. She pulled it when I wanted to attend a university out of state. She pulled it whenever the spotlight drifted too far from her, or whenever she was losing an argument. Frank rushed to her side, supporting her weight. He glared at me with genuine venom. "Look at what you are doing. Are you happy now? You are giving her a heart attack." "She is fine, Dad," I said, my voice devoid of the panic they wanted to hear. "She is having a panic attack because she is losing control. Give her a paper bag." "You heartless little bitch," Frank spat. The insult stung, but it also clarified everything. There was no love here. There was only possession. "Goodbye," I said. I walked out the front door. I didn't slam it. I closed it firmly. Hearing Frank shouting my name and Donna wailing in the background, I walked to my car, got in, and locked the doors. My hands were trembling so hard I had to wait 2 minutes before I could put the key in the ignition. I didn't go back to the apartment immediately. I pulled into a parking lot down the street and called a 24-hour locksmith. "I need a re-key," I told the dispatcher. "Tonight, as soon as possible. It is an emergency." It cost me $250 for the after-hours service. That was my grocery budget for the month. I watched the locksmith, a burly guy named Mike, drill out the old core and slide the new one in. When he handed me the new keys, 2 shiny, silver keys that had never touched my mother's palm, I felt a rush of relief so potent it felt like a drug. "Nobody gets in unless they have these," Mike said, handing me the receipt. "Thank you," I said. "You have no idea what this means." I slept soundly that night, for the first time since moving in. I didn't dream about Donna standing at the foot of my bed. I felt safe. I felt like I had finally pressed the reset button on my life. For the next 3 weeks, silence reigned. My phone was quiet. No texts from Frank. No guilt trips from Donna. No random appearances by Brielle. It was as if by standing up to them, I had finally broken the spell. I began to relax. I started cooking again. I put my throw pillows back on the sofa. I even started dating a nice guy from accounting named David, and we had coffee without me checking my phone every 5 minutes. I told myself that they were pouting. I told myself they were giving me the silent treatment as punishment, which was fine by me. I thought they had accepted the new reality. Rosemary has a locked door, and we can't open it. I was so incredibly naive. It was a Tuesday, almost exactly 3 weeks after the confrontation. I left work early because I had a migraine. The sky was gray and heavy with impending rain. All I wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and crawl into bed. I rode the elevator up to the 2nd floor, my head throbbing. I walked down the hall, clutching my purse. I reached my door. I pulled out my new key, the expensive, exclusive key, and slid it into the lock. It turned smoothly. The deadbolt clicked back. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, dropping my keys into the little bowl by the entrance. "Hi, honey," a voice said. I froze. My blood ran cold, instantly killing the headache and replacing it with pure, unadulterated shock. I walked into the living room. Donna was sitting on my teal velvet armchair. She had her shoes off, her feet were tucked under her. She was holding one of my mugs, steaming with tea. The television was on, tuned to a daytime talk show. She looked comfortable. She looked settled. She looked like she had been there for hours. I blinked, trying to make the image disappear. I looked at the door I had just unlocked. I looked back at her. "How?" I whispered. The words scraped out of my throat. "I changed the locks. I have the only keys." Donna took a sip of tea and smiled. It wasn't a malicious smile. It was a pitying one. The kind of smile you give a toddler who thinks they can hide by covering their eyes. "Oh, Rosemary," she said softly, "you really shouldn't waste your money on locksmiths. It is very irresponsible." "How did you get in?" I yelled, the shock turning into terror. "Did you break a window? Did you pick the lock?" "Don't be dramatic," she said, setting the mug down on a coaster. I didn't break anything. I just used the key. You don't have a key. I didn't, she admitted. But Mr. Keller does. Mr. Keller? I asked. The building manager? Such a nice man, Donna said. I came by around noon. I was crying. Rosemary, I was a mess. I told him I was so worried about you. I told him you haven't been answering your phone, which is true. You haven't. I told him about your episodes. My episodes? I stared at her. I don't have episodes. I told him about your depression, she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I told him we are terrified you might hurt yourself. I showed him some photos of you when you were a baby, and we just cried together in his office. He is a father, too. He understood. He couldn't let a mother stand outside when her daughter might be lying inside with her wrists slit. She stood up and walked over to me, reaching out to brush a stray hair from my forehead. I recoiled as if she were burning hot. He gave me the maintenance key card, she said. He said I could come in and wait for you, to make sure you were safe. See? I am not trespassing. The landlord let me in. I looked at her, standing there in my living room, drinking my tea, having manipulated a stranger into unlocking a door I paid $250 to seal. She hadn't broken in with a crowbar. She had broken in with a lie so damaging, so humiliating, that it would now be permanently attached to my rental file. You told him I was suicidal? I asked, my voice trembling. I did what I had to do, she said simply. I couldn't let you lock me out. Rose, I love you too much. She looked at me with eyes that were terrifyingly devoid of guilt. Now, she said, clapping her hands together lightly, since I am here, I noticed your fridge is empty again. Shall we order Chinese? I didn't answer. I couldn't breathe. I realized then that a lock is only as strong as the person holding the master key, and my mother had just figured out how to hack the human element of my security system. I stood there, watching my mother blow on her tea, and I felt something inside me snap. It was not a loud, dramatic crack like a bone breaking. It was a quiet, internal severance, like a tether finally being cut loose in deep space. She had told Mr. Keller I was suicidal. She had walked into the leasing office, summoned tears on command, and fabricated a story about her daughter having a history of self-harm. She had turned my desire for privacy into a symptom of mental illness. She had weaponized the very concept of a mother's love to manipulate a stranger into breaking the law for her. And the worst part? She was proud of it. She sat there on my velvet chair, radiating the smug satisfaction of a woman who had solved a difficult puzzle. You lied to him, I said, my voice dangerously calm. You told my landlord that I am mentally unstable so you could get a key card. I didn't lie. Rosemary, she said, taking a sip of the tea she had made in my kitchen. I adjusted the narrative. If I had told him I just wanted to see you, he would have cited policy. But people respond to emergencies. People respond to a mother's pain. Look at the result. I am here. You are safe. The system worked. The system didn't work. Mom, you hacked it. I did what was necessary, she said, dismissing my anger with a wave of her hand. And honestly, locking your mother out? That is a sign of instability. So, in a way, I wasn't lying at all. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I realized in that moment that arguing with Donna was like trying to explain quantum physics to a goldfish. She lived in a reality where she was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets designed to orbit her warmth. If we drifted too far, she would simply adjust gravity to pull us back. I waited for her to finish her tea. I waited for her to lecture me about the dust on my blinds. When she finally left, satisfied that she had reestablished her territory, I didn't cry. I went straight to my computer. I wrote an email to Mr. Keller and the entire management team at Northbridge Apartments. My hands flew across the keyboard with the precision of a court stenographer. To whom it may concern, I am writing to formally correct the record regarding the incident today. I am not, nor have I ever been, in danger of self-harm. The statements made by Donna Perez were false and were used solely to bypass your security protocols. Effective immediately. No individual, family or otherwise, is permitted access to my unit without my written, notarized consent. If Donna Perez or Frank Perez approaches the leasing office again, I am to be notified immediately, and access is to be denied. If this breach of lease happens again, I will be forced to take legal action against the management company for compromising my safety. I hit send. It felt like firing a warning shot. But I knew, deep down, that a warning shot only works if the enemy is afraid of the gun. My parents weren't afraid. They thought the gun was a toy. That night, I couldn't sleep. The feeling of violation was crawling under my skin. I decided to check the footage from the small, inconspicuous camera I had installed above my balcony door the day after the locksmith visit. I hadn't checked it in weeks because things had been quiet. I pulled up the app on my phone and scrolled back through the timeline. What I saw made my blood freeze. 3 days ago, Tuesday night, I was at work, pulling a late shift. The video showed my darkened balcony. Then, a pair of white sneakers appeared on the railing. A figure hoisted themselves up from the first-floor patio below. It was Brielle. She was wearing a neon crop top and gym shorts. She swung her legs over my railing with the ease of someone who had done this before. She tried the balcony door. Locked. She didn't look disappointed. She looked entertained. She pulled out her phone, turned the screen brightness up, and started recording herself. I watched the silent footage of my sister leaning against my glass door, posing, making duck lips, and pointing into my dark living room. She was laughing. I could read her lips as she spoke to her phone camera. Mission impossible fail. Big sis locked the fortress. But look at this view, though. She spent 10 minutes on my balcony, rearranging my outdoor chairs to get better lighting for her selfies, before climbing back down. She hadn't come to check on me. She hadn't come because she was worried. She had come because violating my boundaries was content. My privacy was just a backdrop for her social media presence. To them, my no was just a prop in their family sitcom. The next morning, I made an appointment with Dr. Elise Garner. I had been to therapy before, but it was always the gentle guidance kind. This time, I needed a diagnosis. I needed to know if I was crazy. I sat on Dr. Garner's beige couch, clutching a throw pillow, and I laid it all out. The keys, the GPS tracking, the trash bag of food, the live stream from my bed, the lie about suicide to the landlord. Am I the bad seed? I asked her, my voice trembling for the first time in days. Am I cold? My mother says I am cold. She says I am punishing them for loving me. Maybe I am. Maybe I should just be grateful they care enough to break in. Dr. Garner took off her glasses and looked at me. She didn't look horrified, which was comforting. She looked like a mechanic inspecting an engine that had been deliberately sabotaged. Rosemary, she said softly, have you ever heard the term enmeshment? I shook my head. It is a psychological state where boundaries between family members become blurred or non-existent, she explained. In an enmeshed family, individual autonomy is viewed as a threat. Your mother doesn't see you as a separate person with your own rights and needs. She sees you as an extension of herself, an appendage. When you close a door, she doesn't feel like you are closing a door on a room. She feels like you are cutting off her arm. So it is love? I asked weakly. Just too much love? Sighs. No, Elise said firmly. It is not love. Love requires respect. Love acknowledges that the other person is a distinct human being. This is control masquerading as intimacy. It is anxiety. It is narcissism. Your parents and your sister are using you to regulate their own emotions. Your mother feels anxious. She invades your space to soothe herself. Your sister needs attention. She uses your life as a stage. You are not a daughter to them. Rosemary, you are an emotional pacifier. An emotional pacifier. The image hit me hard. I wasn't a person. I was a tool they used to make themselves feel better, important, needed. So what do? I asked. I changed the locks. I emailed the landlord. I set the boundaries. Boundaries only work if the other party is willing to respect them, Elise said. or if you have the leverage to enforce them. In this dynamic, your parents view your boundaries as a challenge. Every lock you install is just a puzzle for them to solve. And as you saw with the landlord incident, they are willing to escalate to extreme manipulation to solve that puzzle. She leaned forward. You are not safe there. Rosemary, I don't mean physically safe, though the balcony climbing is concerning. I mean psychologically safe. As long as they know where you are, they will view that territory as theirs. You cannot heal in the same environment that is making you sick. You mean I have to move? I mean you have to disappear, Elise said. If you want to break this cycle, you need a period of total, absolute detachment. You need to live somewhere they cannot find. You need to work somewhere they cannot call. You need to exist in a space that has never been colonized by the Perez family. I drove home slowly, processing her words, disappear. It sounded extreme. It sounded like something a spy would do, or a criminal on the run. But as I visualized it, a weight began to lift from my chest. I thought about changing the locks again. What would happen? Donna would just wait in the parking lot. She would follow me in through the garage gate. She would befriend a neighbor. She would hire a private investigator. She would scream fire. There was no lock strong enough to keep out a mother who believed she was entitled to the space behind it. But what if there was no door to knock on? What if I wasn't just the ungrateful daughter locking them out? What if I was the ghost they couldn't summon? I walked into my apartment, the apartment that now felt tainted by Donna's tea and Brielle's sneakers, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them over this square footage anymore. They had won this battle. They had successfully polluted this space until it no longer felt like mine. But I was going to win the war. I sat down at my desk and opened a new browser window. I didn't look at listings in Powderhorn. I didn't look at listings in the suburbs. I looked at the map of Minneapolis and traced my finger along the river, toward the warehouse district, toward buildings with 24-hour security concierges and elevators that required key fobs for every single floor. I started making a list. Step 1. Secure a new apartment under a pseudonym if possible, or at least with a building management known for ironclad privacy. Step 2. Inform HR at Northbridge Creative about a security issue to block external calls. Step 3. The move. The move had to be surgical. No moving trucks with logos. No daytime parade of boxes. It had to be done in the shadows. And the most important part of the plan, I wouldn't tell them. I wouldn't send a text saying, I am moving. I wouldn't leave a note. I wouldn't give them the chance to beg, to cry, to feign heart attacks, or to guilt me into giving up the new address just for emergencies. I would simply vanish. And when they inevitably came back, because they would come back, probably next Sunday with a casserole and a new excuse, they would find a stranger living in my home. They would face a door that didn't open. And if they tried to force it, if they tried to climb the balcony or lie to the landlord, they wouldn't be dealing with their daughter who was trained to forgive them. They would be dealing with the real world. They would be dealing with strangers who saw their love for what it really was, criminal trespassing. I looked at the camera sensor blinking above my door. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. You want to play house? Let's play hide and seek. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for a luxury complex called Harbor View Residences. It was expensive. It was a fortress. And it was exactly what I needed. Leasing office, a professional voice answered. Hi, I said, my voice steady and strong. I am looking for an immediate move-in, and I have some very specific security requirements regarding unwanted guests. We specialize in privacy, ma'am, the voice said. Good, I replied, because I am about to become invisible. The Harbor View Residences sat on the edge of the Mississippi River like a fortress made of glass and steel. It was not the kind of place where you could simply buzz a neighbor to let you in. It was the kind of place that required a key fob to open the front door, another fob to access the elevator bank, and a biometric scan to access the package room. To most people, this level of security might have felt excessive or inconvenient. To me, it looked like heaven. I signed the lease using my work email address. I listed a brand new phone number on the contact forms. A prepaid burner line I had purchased at a drugstore with cash. I did not list an emergency contact. When the leasing agent asked for one, I told him that I was new to the area and would update the file later. For the first time in my life, I was intentionally creating a void where my family used to be. The extraction operation, because that is what it was, a military-grade extraction, took place over 4 nights. I couldn't hire a moving truck. A moving truck was a billboard. A moving truck sitting outside my building in Powderhorn would attract attention. Mrs. Gable and Unit 103 would see it and call my mother to ask if I was going on a trip. The network of spies was too dense. So I recruited Naomi and Lucas. Naomi brought her SUV. Lucas brought his station wagon and his sarcasm. We operated like a crew of highly inefficient cat burglars. We worked only between the hours of 10 at night and 1 in the morning. We moved everything in black trash bags and unmarked cardboard boxes, carrying them down the back stairs to avoid the main lobby camera, just in case Mr. Keller decided to review the tapes and report back to Donna. "This is ridiculous," Lucas whispered on the 3rd night, grunting as he hauled a box of my books toward his car. "I feel like I'm robbing a library. Rosemary, are you sure we can't just rent a van?" "If my mother sees a van, she will park her car behind it and refuse to move until I tell her where I'm going," I whispered back, scanning the dark street for familiar vehicles. "Keep moving. You are doing great." "We are stealing your life back," Naomi said, dropping a bag of clothes into her trunk. "It is a reverse heist. We are breaking out of prison, not breaking in." There was a dark humor to it. We laughed nervously as we sped away from the curb, looking in the rearview mirrors to make sure no beige sedan was following us. But beneath the jokes, my heart was racing every single second. Every time headlights swept across the parking lot, I flinched. I was terrified that Frank would jump out of the bushes, or that Brielle would be live streaming from the sidewalk. By Thursday night, the apartment in Powderhorn was empty. I spent 3 hours scrubbing it. I didn't want to give Mr. Keller a single reason to call me. I didn't want him to say I lost my security deposit. I didn't want him to have an excuse to reach out to my emergency contact because I left a stain on the carpet. I wiped the counters. I vacuumed the floors until they looked new. I spackled the tiny holes where my pictures had hung. Then, I took photos. I photographed every corner, every wall, every appliance. I time-stamped them. I uploaded them to a draft email addressed to Mr. Keller. "Dear Mr. Keller, please accept this email as confirmation that Unit 204 has been vacated in perfect condition. I have left the keys in the Dropbox. My forwarding address for the security deposit is listed below." I used the address of Northbridge Creative. I added a note. "Please direct all future mail to this business address. Do not forward anything to my previous emergency contacts." It was 2 in the morning when I stood in the lobby of the old building for the last time. The air smelled of stale floor wax and memories I wanted to burn. I held the heavy envelope in my hand. Inside were all the keys, the front door, the mail, the garage, and, just for good measure, I had thrown in the spare key Donna had forced me to give her, which I had stolen back from the table during our last fight at her house. I walked to the metal drop box mounted on the wall. I opened the slot. I dropped the envelope inside. Clunk. The sound was final. It was the sound of a gavel hitting a block. I walked out into the cool night air, got into my car, and drove toward the river. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. When I arrived at Harbor View, the night concierge was on duty. His name was Mr. Dorsey, a man with broad shoulders and a face carved out of granite. He wore a uniform that looked sharper than most police officers. He looked up as I dragged my last suitcase through the revolving doors. "Ms. Perez?" he asked. "Yes," I said, breathless. "Welcome home," he said. He handed me a small white key card. "We have your instructions on file." I leaned over the marble desk. "Mr. Dorsey, I need to be very clear. If anyone comes here asking for me, anyone, even if they say they are my parents, even if they are crying, even if they say there is a medical emergency, you do not let them up. You do not tell them I am here. You call the police if they refuse to leave." "Mr. Dorsey didn't blink. He didn't look at me with pity or confusion. He looked at me with the steady assurance of a man who had protected high-profile clients from worse things than suburban mothers. "Ms. Perez," he said, his voice deep and calm. "Unless they have a warrant signed by a judge, nobody gets past this desk. You have my word." I almost cried. I took the key card and rode the elevator up to the 14th floor. My new apartment was smaller than the old one. It was a studio, effectively, but one wall was entirely glass, looking out over the dark, churning water of the Mississippi. The city lights reflected on the surface like scattered diamonds. The furniture Naomi and Lucas had helped me move was stacked in the center of the room. It was chaotic. It was messy. But as I locked the door, slide lock, deadbolt, handle lock, I realized something. Nobody had a copy of this key. Nobody knew this address. Nobody was going to wake me up with bacon tomorrow morning. I walked to the window and pressed my hand against the cold glass. For the first time in 29 years, I was completely, utterly untethered. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I went to the settings. I turned off notifications for everything. Then, I turned the phone off completely. I threw it into a drawer in the kitchen. I gave myself a rule: 72 hours. For 3 days. I would not exist to the outside world. I would unpack. I would sleep. I would stare at the river. I would detox from the cortisol that had been pumping through my veins since childhood. The first day was strange. I kept waiting for the door to open. Every time the refrigerator hummed or the elevator dinged down the hall, my muscles clenched, but nobody came. The second day, I slept for 14 hours. I woke up, ate cereal on the floor, and watched the sun move across the river. The third day, I started to feel human. I realized that the silence wasn't empty. It was full of potential. I put my clothes in the closet. I arranged my books. I sat in my teal chair and read a book without worrying that someone was reading over my shoulder. On the evening of the fourth day, I opened the kitchen drawer. The phone sat there like a dormant bomb. I knew what was waiting inside it. I knew that by turning it on, I was re-entering the battlefield. But I couldn't hide forever. I needed to know how bad the fallout was. I pressed the power button. The Apple logo appeared, then the lock screen. Then, the vibration started. It wasn't a buzz. It was a continuous, angry spasm. The phone shook in my hand as the notifications flooded in. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, 12 voicemails. I scrolled past the messages from Naomi. "Hope you are alive, girl." And Lucas. "My back still hurts. You owe me beer." I went straight to the name that dominated the screen. Mom. The timeline of the messages told a story of escalating madness. Friday, 8:00 a.m. "Morning, sweetie. Thinking of coming by to bring you some leftovers." Friday, 9:30 a.m. "Are you at work? I am at your apartment. Your key doesn't work. The lock feels stiff. Did you change it again?" Friday, 10:15 a.m. "Mr. Keller says you moved out. Is this a joke? Where are you?" Friday, 12:00 p.m. "Pick up the phone. Rosemary. This isn't funny. You can't just leave without telling us. We are family." Friday, 4:00 p.m. "Dad is driving around looking for your car. Why are you doing this to us? Do you hate us that much?" Then, Saturday. The tone shifted from hurt to angry. Saturday, 9:00 a.m. "Brielle is crying. She thinks you are dead. If you don't answer, I am going to assume something happened." Saturday, 2:00 p.m. "You are selfish. You are a selfish, cruel girl. After everything we did, we bought you that couch. You stole our furniture." I had bought the couch myself. And finally today, Sunday, the tone had shifted again, this time to cold, hard threats. Sunday, 11:00 a.m. "We know you are in the city. Frank tracked your credit card transaction to a gas station near the river. We are going to find you." Sunday, 1:30 p.m. "This is the last warning. Rosemary, if you don't call me in the next hour, I am going to the police. I will tell them you are missing. I will tell them you are mentally unstable and a danger to yourself. I will have them ping your phone. Do you want the cops banging on your door? Because that is what is going to happen." I stared at the last message. "Do you want the cops banging on your door?" I looked out at the peaceful river. I looked at my sturdy, locked door. "Actually, Mom," I whispered to the empty room, "I think that is exactly what I want." I didn't reply to the text. I didn't call her back. I set the phone down on the counter. Let them call the police. Let them file a missing persons report. Let them try to weaponize the law against me one more time. Because this time, I wasn't the scared little girl hiding in her bedroom. I was a woman who had documented everything. I had the emails to Mr. Keller. I had the receipts for the movers. I had the lease in my name. And most importantly, I had a detective named Morales who was about to call me any minute now. The phone buzzed one more time. No number? I picked it up. "This is Rosemary. Ms. Perez, this is Detective Morales." The cycle was complete. They had played their final card, and they had no idea that they had just handed me the winning hand. The air in the police station smelled like floor wax and stale coffee, a scent that was strangely grounding. I sat on a hard plastic chair in the waiting area, my hand deep in my jacket pocket, fingers curled around the edges of my key card for the Harbor View residences, the plastic edge dug into my palm, a sharp, physical reminder that I had a home they could not touch. "Ms. Perez?" I looked up. Detective Morales was standing there. He looked tired, but his eyes were kind. He held a clipboard in one hand and gestured with the other toward a heavy metal door. "They are in interview room B," he said. "Now, I want to prepare you. They are agitated. They have been insisting that this is a misunderstanding for the last hour. Are you ready?" "I am ready," I said, and to my surprise, I meant it. He led me down a hallway lined with fluorescent lights that hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz. He opened the door, and the sound of my mother's voice spilled out before I even crossed the threshold. "Absolutely ridiculous. We are upstanding citizens. My husband is a respected accountant." I stepped inside. The room was small, dominated by a metal table bolted to the floor, and there they were, the holy trinity of my trauma. Donna was sitting closest to the door, her face a mask of tragic suffering. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in two perfect dark rivers, a look I knew she had practiced in the mirror. Frank was pacing the small length of the room, his face flushed a dangerous shade of purple. Brielle was slumped in a chair, arms crossed, tapping her foot with a rhythm that screamed annoyance rather than fear. When they saw me, the air left the room. For a second, there was silence. Then, Donna launched herself from the chair. "Rosemary!" she wailed, rushing toward me as if she intended to tackle me. Detective Morales stepped smoothly between us. Holding up a hand, Donna stopped, clutching her chest. "You vanished!" she screamed, her voice cracking with theatrical grief. "You just vanished! We thought you were dead. We thought you were lying in a ditch. How could you do this to us? Do you have any idea what you put your father through?" "We have been worried sick," Frank barked, pointing a finger at me over Morales' shoulder. "We drive all the way to the city to check on you, to save you. And this is the thanks we get? You let the police arrest your mother?" "I didn't let them do anything," I said, my voice steady. "You got yourselves arrested." "It is a misunderstanding," Frank insisted, turning to Morales. "Officer, I told you, we are her parents. We have a key. We were just doing a wellness check because she hasn't answered her phone in 3 days." "A wellness check?" I repeated. I looked at Brielle. "Is that what you call it?" Brielle rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. She had clearly been allowed to keep it, which explained why she wasn't crying. "This is literally so embarrassing, Rosemary," she snapped. "I was in the middle of a live stream. I was doing a day-in-the-life vlog. I had 600 people watching, and then the cops showed up and made me get off the balcony. Do you know what the comments are saying? They are calling me a criminal. You ruined my brand." "Your brand?" I stared at her. "You were climbing a balcony." "I was trying to open the door," she shot back. Because you changed the locks again. You psycho. Who changes locks on their family? Okay, that is enough, Morales said. His voice was not loud, but it had a weight to it that silenced the room. He walked over to the table and dropped a file folder onto the metal surface. It made a heavy slap sound. Let's be very clear about what happened today, Morales said, looking from Frank to Donna. This was not a wellness check. This was an attempted break-in. We have a right, Frank started. You have no rights to that property, Morales cut him off. And here is how I know that. The lease for Unit 204 at the Powderhorn building is currently held by a Mr. Jake Doyle and his wife, Marissa. They moved in 4 days ago. Donna blinked. What? Rosemary doesn't live there, Morales said. She vacated the premises last week. The people you were terrorizing, the people whose door you were pounding on, that was a young couple with a newborn baby. They had no idea who you were. She moved? Donna whispered, looking at me with genuine horror. Without telling me? Mr. Doyle provided us with video footage from his Ring doorbell, Morales continued, ignoring her shock. He opened the folder and pulled out a still image printed on standard paper. He held it up. It showed Donna, face contorted in rage, hammering on the door with her fist. This is you, Mrs. Perez, screaming, and I quote, "Open this door or I will break it down." He pulled out another photo. This one showed Frank standing on the lawn, pointing up at the second floor. This is you, Mr. Perez, instructing your daughter on where to find a foothold in the brickwork. He pulled out a third photo. It was Brielle, halfway up the balcony railing, her neon hoodie bright against the brick. And this is you, Ms. Perez, attempting to gain entry to a second-story dwelling occupied by strangers. Morales lowered the photos. The Doyles were terrified. Mrs. Doyle was on the phone with 911 hiding in the bathroom with her infant because she thought a gang was breaking in. That is not love. Folks, that is a home invasion. We didn't know, Frank sputtered, his bluster deflating rapidly. We thought it was Rosemary inside. If we had known it was strangers, we wouldn't have... Obviously, we wouldn't have done it. So it is okay to break down a door if it is your daughter inside? Morales asked. Is that the legal argument you want to make? Frank opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He realized that the family card he had been playing his whole life didn't work in a police station. Morales turned to me. The room felt very small suddenly. Ms. Perez, he said formally, the Doyles are pressing charges for the disturbance, but since the intent was clearly directed at you, and since you are the target of this harassment, the district attorney is going to look to you for cooperation. You have the right to request a restraining order. You have the right to support the charges of criminal trespassing and attempted breaking and entering. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Do you want to press charges? I looked at them. I looked at Donna, who was now trembling for real, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Rosemary, she whispered, her voice high and thin. Rosemary, please, we are your parents. You can't put your parents in jail. Think about what people will say. Think about the neighbors. I looked at Frank, who was trying to look authoritative but just looked old and defeated. Rosemary, be reasonable. We made a mistake. We just wanted to see you. I looked at Brielle, who had finally put her phone down. She looked bored, as if this whole legal proceeding was just a long line at a coffee shop. I have a list, I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. Excuse me? Donna asked. I have a list, I said louder, of every time you broke in. I looked directly at my mother. Do you remember the Sunday morning you let yourself in and threw away $70 worth of my groceries because you didn't like the brand of pizza I bought? That was theft. Donna flinched. I was cooking you breakfast. Do you remember, I turned to Brielle, when you brought 4 friends over while I was out of town, drank my wine, slept in my bed, and live-streamed yourself mocking my private therapy notes? That was unauthorized entry and invasion of privacy. It was a joke, Brielle protested. Do you remember, I turned back to Donna, When you went to my landlord, Mr. Keller, and told him I was suicidal? When you lied and said I was going to hurt myself just so he would give you a key card? That is fraud. That is character defamation. I was worried, Donna shrieked. I did it because I love you. No, I said. You didn't. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Love respects a closed door. Mom, love waits to be invited. You didn't come to check on me. You came to inspect your property. You treat me like a house you own the deed to. You think you can renovate me, redecorate me, and walk in whenever you want. I took a deep breath. I felt lightheaded, but clarity was washing over me like cold water. You didn't know I moved, I said. You didn't know because I didn't tell you, and I didn't tell you because I knew you would do exactly this. I knew you would hunt me down. Hunt you down? Frank shook his head. We are not hunters, Rosemary. We are family. Then why does it feel exactly the same? I asked. I turned to Detective Morales. If 3 strangers did this, I said, pointing at them, if 3 random people tracked my phone, lied to my landlord to get a key, and then climbed my balcony when the locks were changed, would you ask me if I wanted to press charges? Morales didn't hesitate. No, ma'am. We would have booked them immediately. Exactly, I said. I looked back at my parents. Donna was sobbing now. Ugly. Gasping sobs. Frank was pale. Brielle looked like she was trying to calculate how this would affect her follower count. You always told me that family is the most important thing, I said. You told me that family excuses everything. That is why you thought you could break in. Because you thought the title of mother and father gave you immunity. I gripped my keycard tighter. But today, you are not my parents, I said. Today you are 3 people who tried to break into a house that didn't belong to you. I looked at Morales. I want to make a statement, I said. I want everything on the record, the keys, the harassment, the lies to the landlord, everything. Rosemary, Donna screamed. You can't do this. I am not doing it to you, I said, turning my back on them to face the door. You did it to yourselves when you climbed that balcony. The silence in the small interrogation room was heavy enough to crush bone. My mother's sobbing had tapered off into quiet. Rhythmic hitches of breath, the kind meant to signal she was waiting for someone to comfort her, but nobody moved. Detective Morales stood at the head of the metal table, his expression unreadable, looking like a referee who was tired of blowing the whistle. Here is the situation, Morales said, his voice cutting through the humid air of the room. The Doyles are furious. Mr. Doyle wants to see people in handcuffs. Mrs. Doyle is traumatized. However, they are decent people. They understand that this is a family matter that spiraled out of control. They have agreed to hold off on pressing full criminal charges, but only on one condition. He paused, looking directly at Frank. They want a guarantee that this will never happen again, and if you step 1 foot on their property, they will sue you for everything you own, and we will process the arrest warrants immediately. Donna scoffed, wiping her eyes with a tissue Morales had provided. Well, of course we won't go back there. Rosemary doesn't live there. Why would we go back to an empty apartment? It is not just about that building, Morales corrected her. It is about the behavior. We are offering you a deal. It is called a deferred prosecution agreement. It means we don't file the criminal trespassing charges today. We keep the file open. If you stay out of trouble and follow a specific set of rules for 12 months, the charges go away. If you break one rule, we file them, and you go to court. Do you understand? We are not criminals, Frank muttered, rubbing his temples. We don't need a probation officer. Then you are going to love the terms, Morales said dryly. He slid a piece of paper across the table. Condition number 1. You sign a binding no-contact order regarding Rosemary's residence and place of employment. You cannot show up unannounced, ever. He tapped the paper. Condition number 2. You cannot contact third parties to track her. That means no calling landlords, no calling her boss at Northbridge Creative, no calling her neighbors to ask if she is home. And condition number 3. Mandatory family counseling for all three of you. Counseling? Donna sat up straight, her indignation overriding her performance of grief. You want me to see a shrink? Because I love my daughter? That is insulting. I am a mother, not a mental patient. I was worried about her safety. Since when is caring for your child a pathology that needs treatment? She looked at me, eyes wide and pleading, waiting for me to jump in and agree that the police were being unreasonable. It is not caring. Mom, I said, my voice flat. It is stalking. How can you say that? She spat back. I carried you in my body. Donna, stop, Frank said. It was spoken so quietly, I almost missed it. We all turned to look at him. My father was holding the photo of Brielle hanging off the balcony. He was staring at it with a strange expression, like he was seeing it for the first time. Frank? Donna asked, confused. Tell him we don't need therapy. Look at this, Frank said, shoving the photo toward her. Look at it. Donna, that is Brielle, hanging off a second-story railing, like a cat burglar. She was breaking into a stranger's house, Frank interrupted, his voice rising. We were standing on the lawn screaming. The neighbors called 911. I watched the video the detective showed us. I looked like a maniac. I looked like those people on the news that we make fun of. He looked up at me, and his eyes were red. We went too far. I didn't see it until I saw the picture, but we went too far. Frank! Donna gasped, betrayed. I am signing it, Frank said. He picked up the pen. I am not going to jail, and I am not letting you go to jail, and clearly, we don't know how to stop ourselves. He signed his name with a shaky hand. The scratch of the pen on paper was the loudest sound in the world. Morales looked at me. Ms. Perez, it is up to you. You can reject this. You can tell me to file the charges right now. We have the evidence. We have the confession. If you want to see them booked, say the word. This was the moment. The power shifted across the table, sliding from their hands into mine. I looked at the three of them. I thought about the years of open doors. I thought about the GPS tracker on my phone in high school. I thought about my diary being read aloud. I thought about the bacon grease on my stove and the lie about me being suicidal. A part of me, the angry, wounded part, wanted to burn it all down. I wanted to see them in mugshots. I wanted them to feel the humiliation they had inflicted on me 1,000 times. But then I looked at the paper Frank had just signed, a legal document, a boundary with teeth. If I put them in jail, they would become martyrs. Donna would spend the rest of her life playing the victim, telling everyone how her cruel daughter sent her to prison. She would feed on that drama forever. But a contract? A contract stripped them of the drama. It made the boundary boring. It made it bureaucratic. It made it real. I have a question, I said, looking at the three of them, and I want an honest answer. The room went still. If today, instead of being your daughter, I was a stranger, I said slowly. If I was just a woman you didn't know, and you saw 3 people trying to climb my balcony and scream my name, would you think they were loving parents? Or would you think they were dangerous? Donna looked away. Brielle picked at her fingernails. Frank held my gaze, and then he lowered his head. We would think they were dangerous, he whispered. Exactly, I said. I turned to Morales. I agree to the terms, but I want one thing added to the file. If they violate this agreement, even once, even a text message to my boss, even a drive-by of my new building, I want the full charges reinstated immediately. No warnings, no second chances. Understood, Morales said. 0 tolerance. He pushed the paper toward Donna. Sign it, Mrs. Perez, or I take out the handcuffs. Donna picked up the pen. Her hand was trembling violently. She didn't look at me. She stared at the paper as if it were a death warrant. She signed her name in tiny, cramped letters, completely unlike her usual flamboyant signature. Brielle signed it next, rolling her eyes but looking pale. Fine, whatever. Can we go now? I have literally 0 content for today. Morales took the paper and checked the signatures. You are free to go, But remember, the Doyles have a restraining order pending. Stay away from Powderhorn, and stay away from Ms. Perez unless she invites you, which, frankly, I wouldn't count on." They stood up. Frank looked at me, opened his mouth to speak, and then closed it. He just nodded, a small, sad gesture of surrender. Donna refused to look at me at all. She marched out of the room, clutching her purse, her heels clicking angrily on the linoleum. Brielle followed, typing furiously on her phone, probably already spinning a story for her followers about how she was the victim of police brutality. I stayed in the chair for a moment. "You did the right thing," Morales said quietly. "Jail is temporary. Realizing you lost your daughter? That lasts a long time." "Thank you, Detective," I said, "for asking if I was safe." "Keep that door locked, Rosemary," he said with a smile. "Oh," I said, standing up and gripping my keycard. "I intend to." I walked out of the station and into the late afternoon sun. The light was golden and heavy, the kind of light that makes everything look sharp and defined. I walked to the parking lot. My car was sitting there, a small, silver island of independence. I looked down at my hands. In my left hand, I held the copy of the agreement, 3 signatures that legally codified my freedom. In my right hand, I held the white plastic rectangle that opened the door to the Harbor View residences. For 29 years, I had been told that a key was a symbol of trust, and that taking it back was an act of betrayal. I had been told that love meant having no walls. I looked at the empty space where my parents' car had been. They were gone. They were heading back to Maple Grove, back to their beige house, back to a life where they would have to explain to a therapist why they couldn't stop controlling me. I pressed the unlock button on my key fob. The car chirped. 2 short, cheerful beeps that echoed in the empty lot. I opened the door and paused, looking back toward the station, then turning to face the invisible audience that has been with me through this whole mess. "They can still call me their daughter," I said, speaking to the air, speaking to you. "They can keep my baby pictures. They can keep the memories. But from this moment on, there is one thing they don't get to keep." I held up the keycard. "From now on, I am the only one who holds the key to my life." I got in the car, locked the door, and drove toward the river. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive all of that, but I hope it helps someone out there realize that setting boundaries isn't an act of hate, it is an act of survival. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to change your locks to keep family out? Or am I the only one with parents who think breaking and entering is a love language? Let's talk about it. Please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel for more real-life dramas like mine. Hit that like button if you think I made the right choice, and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who might need to hear it. Stay safe, and keep your doors locked.